Welcome to Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Sardelli. Today we welcome to the LATV studios a fine gentleman who, in retirement, still leads, as you will learn, a very active life. Larry, he prefers that I don't call him Larry. He prefers that I don't call him Mr. Student. A retired businessman, author, horticulturist, and as I am finding out in our pre-interview, a very, very fine gentleman, a very, very nice guy, a very talented gentleman. I hope that this interview with Larry will bring memories of a time in Leominster's past for those of you who lived back then, and will give a glimpse to younger citizens of Leominster, a glimpse of life in our city before they were born. First of all, Larry, some biographical information. You are associated with you've lived in Leominster for a long time.
55 years.
55 years, but you were born in Fitchburg.
I was born in Fitchburg in 1929, and grew up in Fitchburg, and started working my father in the shoe business when I was 12 years old, so I had a lot of experience with that. I grew up off of Orange Square, and I remember so many things about growing up, and I was introduced to music when I was about 11 years old by a neighbor who was into jazz, and at Wayland Park, at the bottom of the street where I lived, near Orange Square, the electric buses ran, and they were electric buses because the wires were still there from when they had streetcars.
But they were rubber tires.
But they were rubber tires. They dug up the steel for World War II to use in manufacturing. And in Wayland Park on Saturday nights were local bands, and on Monday nights were big bands. And they came, whatever band you heard about probably came to Leominster, Fitchburg, and Wayland in the old days. I remember Tony Pastor came with two singers, two sisters, 16 years old. It was Rosemary Clooney and her sister. And those were fabulous days growing up in Fitchburg, and we grew up during the war, and I was active with the Boy Scouts, and we participated in a lot of marches and different things, helping the men who were away overseas. In fact, where the Fitchburg Post Office was the Low House, and next to it was Lucy Helen Hospital, where children were delivered, and the Low House was the USO. And twice a month, I would put on my scout uniform and go and run the code room for the men from Devon's and home on leave would have dances there.
I remember I think I remember where the Lucy Helen Hospital was. The name of this program is Outstanding Volunteer, and Larry, you mentioned the Boy Scouts. You were an Eagle Scout.
Through Air Scouts, we wore powder blue uniforms, and I also belonged to the Explorer Scouts. And with scouting, I started working when I was 14 years old at the scout camp in Ringe, New Hampshire, where Franklin Pierce College is. The men were in the service, and I was the bugler there, and worked at the camp. And then I was there for 2 years, and they bought a piece of property in Ashburnham, 16 acres, and named it Camp Split Rock because there was an enormous boulder there with a tree growing in it, and we moved the scout camp to there. And it was a Fitchburg area council, but Leominster had a separate council, and they had Camp Winoxet up in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, and the two councils merged, and I was on the merger committee maybe I was in my 20s or 30s, I don't know. But I worked there for a number of years. I was also the bugler, and I was a hiking counselor. And now the camp has 160 acres, and I'm a trustee. Yeah. I'm still involved with that.
From our previous conversation over in the studio here, I'm seeing that, learning that all of these, your interest in other people and doing things for people and being active started very, very young in your life.
And we had when I was in my high school days, I played in the high school band. I wasn't into sports, but I played trumpet with the band, and with some great bandsmen. And some of them are still alive, and some have passed away. But I remember at the football games, particularly Thanksgiving, and we played, and the Leominster band played, and our band was larger than Leominster's at the time, and it was poured that day, but we still played. And it was at Doyle Field. I remember that distinctly. But I went in the service, and I went to Nichols College out of high school, and there were 5 of us out of high schools, and all the rest were veterans, and they're the ones that taught me how to live. It was 2-year college, and after I graduated, I joined my father in the shoe business in a Fitchburg store, but we had a store in Leominster, and I'd be down to Leominster a couple days a week. At that store, I did most of the buying. We also had a store in Gardner. And my father and his 2 brothers came to the area in the 20s, and one had a store in Gardner and one had a store in Leominster, and my father was in Fitchburg, and eventually he bought out the 2 other brothers. And so I joined the service in 1950.
So let me interrupt for a moment.
Okay.
So that's where the connection, the Student Brothers shoe store, and I'm going to show, Jack, I'm going to show some pictures now. So the Student Brothers, that refers to your father and
the 2 brothers. The 2 brothers, that's what the name, and he just kept the name.
Okay, and there was a Student Brothers in Leominster?
That was in 1937. We moved to that block, and that's where Friendly's is now.
Wow.
Okay. So this is where the Friendly's restaurant is in Leominster now.
In Leominster.
And Jack, I'm going to move this picture just to see. It says Student Brothers Shoes, Obershaw's, stationery, greeting cards, gifts on the canopy, Eyes Examined, Gloria Chain Store.
Right. The Eyes Examined is, the son of the Eyes Examined is Hathaway Monuments here in Leominster, down by Evergreen Cemetery. And where Obershaw's was, that became Leominster Office Supply, maybe that was the name. And the Gloria store was Frankie D that had the band.
The band, Frankie.
Frankie, and we were good friends. And further down the block was Castellano's photography, and number of stores across the street were Rubens. And the other pictures he's going to show you are another shot of Main Street, and then what the store was originally across the street where the Colonial Hotel was, at the corner of Pleasant Street and Monument Square. And you'll see what Monument Square was like.
And at Student Brothers Shoe Store, I remember going in there, and I would put my feet in the X-ray machine. I remember that.
Yeah, people remember our stores not from the brands of shoes we carried, or that they got great service. It's because of the X-ray machines. Yeah, and this is Monument Square from a different view in '37, and you can see what was in the middle of the monument. Monument Square, they let cars park there.
Yes, I'm going to just turn. There are cars in the middle of the. Yes, where there'd be the traffic islands, I guess, and so on now. And I see a sign, Endicott Johnson Shoes, W.W. Woolworths, and...
well, Woolworths is the wood block now.
The wood block.
Yeah, that was...
So, and Jack, I'm going to show another picture here. Across, I'll put these... This one is... across the street. Now, where would this be?
This was the original store, and this was a Colonial Hotel building. The hotel was up above, and we were the 3rd store in, I believe, and at the corner was a variety store that I'm trying to think of the name, The sons had a package store down next to Dunkin' Donuts off of Central Street on 117. And the father had this variety store, and along there was also Fry's Dairy, and I don't remember the other stores. Maybe Lubin's was a little further down in the tall building, and we were in the middle of the block. And then in 37, we moved across the street. I was 9 years old, and I remember it well.
Okay, and what would be here now would be the TD Bank.
Is it TD? It's been a number of names.
Yes, it's gone through many names, but
that's the building.
Yeah.
So the building still exists.
Yeah, but
it's something. I don't know if it's exactly the same building, but that's what it looked like in the 30s.
Yeah, I think it was, the building probably was rebuilt.
These pictures were taken by that book on Leominster, not the newer history book, but the original with the brown cover.
Yes.
They did a lot of towns with those.
Okay, and so the business, the Student Brothers shoe store. Then eventually you went into the service.
In 1950, after I had been in Nichols and was working in the shoe store, the Korean War started, and I went down to Devon's and decided not to go into the Army band. I was a trumpeter and decided I'd rather go in the Air Force, and I enlisted the first part of November of 1950. And I took my basic training in Texas. Most people went to Lackland. I was there for a week in San Antonio, and it was so filled with people coming in, they sent us up to Wichita Falls, which was a B-59 base. And we got our basic training there, and then from there we graduated. I was home for Christmas, and we were assigned to different places. I was assigned to go to F.E. Warren in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I arrived there the 1st of January, taking trains across the country, arrived there in a blizzard. And I went to clerk typist school there, and they decided they wanted to keep me as an instructor teaching English. I was out of college. I was 21 years old when I went in. So I went to instructor school, and coming out of it, we all became corporals. And so I was assigned to teach, and I did that for a number of months, and then they had a cutback on instructors, as we know how they cut things out today. They did them in those days. And so I was assigned to shipping, receiving, travel pay, where men were processed in and out of the base, and had to do with finance. And then it was training command with 14,000 men on the base, no planes. 2 planes were at the Cheyenne airport, and there were 13 chapel facilities with 26 chaplains and 52 enlisted men, and they needed a supply person, and I had the college background in business, and they transferred me there and gave me my 3rd stripe.
So these were religious chaplains?
Yes, the chaplains of all faiths.
All faiths.
I got married. I met my wife. She was from Denver. And 2 months after we were married, they sent me back east to Fort Slocum in New Rochelle, to New York, to go to chaplain school. And I learned about all the religions and, a lot to do with the chaplaincy. And came back to Cheyenne, and I became NCO of the section in charge of all the facilities and the men. I became a staff sergeant in a little over 2 years. And so I was in charge of that. I worked for a full colonel, a wing chaplain, and took care of supplies for all the chaplains. And we were part of the squadron, which ran the base, the maintenance, not the maintenance of it, but the administration of the base. And so under a chief warrant officer, I became a secondary in supply. And in the military, everything has a yellow or red tag on it, and I was one of those guys with a little stamp, and I could classify different things. And under him, was a health, safety, and fire inspector. And I used to do white glove inspections.
White glove inspections?
Yes, you've heard about those, where you actually put on a pair of white gloves, and you inspect the barracks where the men who were single live, and you actually make sure that their beds are nice and tight, and you bounce a quarter on them, and that their foot lockers were presented at the foot of the bed, and sometimes they would be there at attention or at ease, and if they were not satisfactory to your judgment, you tore the bed apart,
And they had to.
and they lost a weekend pass.
Yeah.
So they shaped up.
Yeah.
The warrant officer, a second lieutenant, and myself and a master sergeant did those inspections. And I know when it was coming up because my phone at the office would ring and the name was student. It was the warrant officer. It was coming up Friday, Saturday morning, there'll be an inspection. But in addition to that, I did a lot of jobs. I worked part-time with the Inspector General at the base. I took care of prisoners that end up 5 to 15 in Leavenworth. I called them my bad boys. I played 2 years part-time with the band. They had about a 30, 35-piece member band. I played trumpet with them. They were happy to have me. I did parades, retreats, raising the flag, dance band, and stuff like that. And I had a good life there. I met my wife. She was from Denver. We lived off the base and in the town of Cheyenne. The town of Cheyenne, compared to the base, was like going from Fitchburg to Leominster. They adjoined each other. My daughter was born at the hospital, and I met my wife, and she graduated high school in Denver on a Friday night. She was 18 years old. We got married on Sunday, and we were married 49 years. Came back here into the shoe business, and then eventually into the plant business.
And now, she is what got you into bonsai.
Yes.
Now,
Bonsai is a Japanese art of dwarfing trees, and she was doing it when I met her when she was 16 years old because a Japanese family moved into the neighborhood, and she ended up studying with the gentleman and his wife who had a magnificent collection. They had a backyard fenced in, as you would see pictures of Japan, with a pond with a pine tree growing over it and hundreds of bonsai and plants in the backyard.
I'm going to show some pictures in a moment of, because you are one of your many interests is you are a horticulturist.
We came back east and we were charter members of Northeast Bonsai Association, and we started doing bonsai and selling them retail and then eventually wholesale. In 1991, a friend of ours had gone to work in Japan, and he was working for Tuttle Publishing from Tokyo, and we got a call asking us to write the book Beginning Bonsai in 1991, and it's a royalty book, and every 6 months I get a check, and both our names are on it, my wife and I, although she's passed 10 years ago, and every 6 months I get a check, and they printed 45,000 of the book.
And you kindly autographed this to me, to Bob, Welcome to the World of Bonsai, Larry Student, by Shirley and Larry Student, Beginning Bonsai, the Gentle Art of Miniature Tree Growing. And you've given me some, you've shown me some of these pictures of, and some of these are quite famous bonsai pieces now.
Some of these were taken 5 years ago. There was a World Bonsai Convention or Congress in Washington, D.C., and I went to it, although Shirley is gone. But we knew all the masters in the United States, and one of the pictures I was going to show you is of some of the bonsai from there. And one of these prize-winning bonsai was done by a fellow by the name of Bob Olario from Fitchburg, whose brother is an accountant with an office here in Leominster, and the brother is a pediatrician in Providence Hospital. And the #1 bonsai on display was his bonsai. And this is a picture of his bonsai. I mean, it was fabulous. And the pictures don't show much, but it would take at least 2 men to carry this bonsai. It must have been 2.5 feet tall with a spread of maybe 3.5 feet.
And some of these plants are years and years old?
Yes, I've seen bonsai 1,000 years old.
Wow.
And well maintained. This was in Washington, these pictures. At the National Arboretum in Washington, there's a whole bonsai area with Japanese bonsai, Chinese bonsai, bonsai from all over the world. And it's 1976 it was dedicated, and Shirley and I were at the dedication. And I've been back 2 or 3 times since then, and it's just a wonderful place.
And you and your wife were horticulturists, really, because you mentioned in the pre-interview that you and Shirley even judged the Boston Flower Show 10 times. That's big. That's big time.
Shirley,
you were judges.
Actually, Shirley started, and the first few years she was invited by herself, and then after that I joined her, and together separately we did different things at the show. We did both amateur and professional. There are a lot of amateurs that show there in different sections, and we judged theirs a couple times. And then the professionals would do the big displays, if you've ever been to the shows, and we were judges of those.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of work, but it's quite prestigious. Boston was the second oldest show in the country.
So you and your wife knew what you were doing.
We knew what we did. Yeah, we knew what we did. And whatever I learned from my wife. She was self-taught horticulturalist, and she worked with the families of the Crocker family's estate. She supervised their grounds, and they all had national award-winning gardens.
One thing, Larry, I've learned in speaking with you, you have a very, very positive attitude, and very kind person and a giving person to other people.
You've done all my life.
You really have helped
through
people.
Scouting was a great background. And then being in college with the men who came back from war, who fought World War II, they taught me a lot to be responsible. And then working with my father, who left school at the 8th grade. His father had passed away, and he had 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and to help maintain the family, he started working then, and he taught me always to be nice to people. And salesmen would come around, not necessarily that we buy from, but they stop and visit because of my father's reputation in the shoe industry, and he always said, give them a little time. These are how the people are earning a living, and someday they might have something you want. And so I was taught that, and I was taught to be nice to customers. And you know, we had friendly stores in those days, and and there good relationships with other people selling shoes in the area.
Now, speaking of the shoe stores again, two people who are very fine people. Bob Cosboom.
Bob Cosboom worked in our Leominster store from high school on, and then when we closed the Leominster store and moved it to Fitchburg, Mike Scaramuzzi, who was the manager, came to Fitchburg to work for me. And then in the old days, a fellow by the name of Russ Lynch, who was on the city council, worked for us, and then he opened his own store. And we had a great relationship with the Leominster people. Ben Feeney, he was a cobbler, and he carried shoes, and we were friends. And then Jack came back from World War II and opened Jack shows, Jack Peralta, and he came from a large family, and his father worked in our Leominster store Thursday nights when we were open, and Saturdays to help support his family. So we were all kind of connected, you know. And then the Leominster people, I knew, even though I grew up in Fitchburg, but I was in the Leominster store and associated with the Leominster Chamber of Commerce, so I knew all the merchants in town. And in those days, we were all friends. There were no big stores, there were no shopping centers and all that.
Your connection to Leominster is very, very strong. In fact, when we were talking in our pre-interview, this is a quote: "Leominster is such a fabulous city."
Absolutely. I grew up in Fitchburg, and I got out of the service, and we built a house and moved into Leominster in 1956, and my children were raised here, and they didn't happen to go to school locally, but we were involved with the Leominster community. My children went to Applewild and then away to prep schools. My children are now 58. My daughter retired 8 months ago. with 27 years with Verizon. She had some great jobs. And my son is 55, and he's been an international lawyer for over 30 years in New York and Helsinki, Finland. And he does work for the big companies like Nokia and that sort of thing. And living in Leominster is great. I live close to downtown and close to the hospital and surrounded by wonderful people. There's only a few houses on my street, 5, and I'm the oldest resident. I am 82 years old, but I'm active. I've always been active. I volunteer at Tower Hill Botanic Garden and we taught classes there for 25 years. 15 years ago, I worked for Richard Early, the veterans agent under the senior program, and that's when the brick program started, and I was the one that ordered them for Carter Park. And they used to take 4 months, and then when we discovered they were made in New Jersey, now it goes on a computer disk, and they're made in Clinton, and they have them in 2 or 3 weeks. And we have 2,500 bricks in Carter Park, and they still sell, and we still have dedication. And I'm involved with the veterans, that program. And Richard is retired, and I know the new volunteer. We have a wonderful veterans building. And with Ralph Saccamarone, who's head of maintenance at City Hall, with the high school kids, they went to that building and put in new floors and new walls and new ceilings and new toilets and offices for the veterans agent associate, and they have different people that rent the affairs, and they have collations after the veterans programs, and they have ping pong tournaments there, I guess, and it's just fabulous. And right next door is the senior center.
Right, and that's one of the many places where you spend time and volunteer.
March 1st, I started volunteering in the adult program
at the seniors
through the city, and I do statistical work for them, working on their bus program and their activities. They run 40 activities a month, some once a month, some twice, sometimes every week.
At the Leominster Senior Center.
People come there, about 35 every day, and have Meals on Wheels served to them, and there's a nominal charge of $2, and then they run the bus program. You call the day before, make a reservation, and they pick you up at your house and take you where you're going, and then tell you you tell them when you want to be picked up, and they charge 50 cents a trip. Cabs are fixed at $5 or $6 for the same thing. It's a bargain, and they keep track of the people, and I work on the bookwork for those programs, and I love it. The great staff there. We're so lucky in Leominster. The people that work for the city are so terrific. I become friendly with a lot of them, and Mayor Dean Mazzarella, I've known him since he was a teenager when he worked at the Victory Market. And look, he's been in 7 terms. And he's terrific, and we're friends, but when I see him, I take my index finger and I say, "You're doing a great job, but you're not perfect." And he's a great guy, we're friends.
He's a good mayor, good mayor.
Yeah, good man.
The Veterans Center, we have Rick Vautour, who took over for Richard Early, and Rick is doing
Rick Vautour grew up in Leominster, and he retired after 20 years in the Marine as a first sergeant, and he has more brass here than Carter has liver pills.
He's doing a fine job.
He's doing a fine job, and he's a fine young man, has a family, and and he has his secretaries that he's had have been very nice. I've known all of them.
So the senior center, the veterans, those are just some of your activities. In fact, in the pre-interview, you asked me, "Are you retired?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Well, you said I'm not. You referring to yourself are not retired."
I volunteer at least 4 days a week, sometimes 5.
And this is, I'm sure I can say this. You've had 2 hips replaced,
and a knee.
And you keep active. You don't let that slow you down.
No. I get up at 4 every morning.
4 o'clock.
I go to bed early. Between 8 and 9. but I cook for myself. I'm a good cook.
Yeah.
And I have friends that I cook for.
Yeah.
And I eat out occasionally. You know, I have to budget because I don't have a big income, but I get along.
You get along very well, and you cook. Sometimes you cook for other people, and in your volunteer activities, you even there's a gentleman that you visit.
Yeah, in Townsend through an agency, and he has some dementia, and he's a few years younger than me, but he originally came from Lowell, and his daughter and her husband built an addition to their house. But he repeats stories a lot, but he has a background of skiing, and I used to ski. He has a background of playing baseball, and my son was a baseball player and went to Ted Williams camp one summer. And so he used to go to the dance halls growing up, the same as I did. And so even though the stories are repeated, we seem to enjoy each other's company. We've been out to lunch together and stuff like that. He doesn't drive anymore, but I've made his life more comfortable, and I've done that to a lot of people over the years. That's how I was brought up.
That's how you were brought up. That's how you were at. That is wonderful.
Scouting did a lot for me too.
Well, you achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. I got to first class with a couple of merit badges, and that was it. But as I've told many people, I wish that every boy could go into be a Cub Scout and become a Boy Scout, and I wish every girl could be a Brownie Scout and then a Girl Scouts. They're wonderful, wonderful organizations. They're wonderful organizations.
But of course now, like my grandson grew up in Westchester County, and they have a fabulous school system, but they had a lot of things after school that he participated in. And my kids went to Applewell, and so they had a lot of activities after school, and so they never got into scouting. But there's still a big scouting program in the council, which was a Fitchburg Council and Leominster Council, and then they merged, and then Gardner Council closed, and that's part of the same council. I think it's called Nashua River Valley or something like. It goes from Acton all the way out to Athol to the New Hampshire border, and I think south to Sterling. So it's a large council, and they have a big Cub program, and they're called different things. No More Explorers or Rare Scouts. I think they're called Senior Scouts or something like that. And Scouts are still active and participate in the community. I know whenever I go to Veterans Affairs at Carter Park, which is a wonderful place, there are always Scout troops there that are participating in the programs, and the young people are terrific. I know that there's a troop at St. Leo's Church, and I've had a number of young people doing my yard work through Scouts that are there, and it's just a great program.
Scouting is a wonderful organization.
Yeah, it is.
And the people who do go through scouting and go through the thing, it has a lifelong effect on their values and their
people that are. When you hear about different people and they talk about their background, many of them have been Eagle Scouts.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You are still on a number. Again, this idea of the title of this show is Outstanding Volunteer. And you are still on the Board of Trustees of, do you do still trustee?
I'm trustees of Camp Split Rock.
Camp Split Rock, right.
And then the Leominster Council has Winoxet. And I've enjoyed that over the years, and I keep in touch with friends that I played in the band with in Fitchburg High, and Bob's going to show you a picture of myself with two of my friends, George Membrino, who lives in Lee. He's retired director of education at the University of Mass Medical School, and Jimmy DePrima, who passed away a year ago, who was a great trumpet player, and he was with the Fitchburg Post Office. And this was taken out at George's house in Lee with the three of us. And there was a fourth. We played trumpet, and the fourth played trombone, and by a fellow by the name of Dan O'Connor, originally from Fitchburg, retired as superintendent of schools in Watertown.
Okay,
And
so
we're still friends.
so let me, the three people in this, there you are.
There I am.
All right, and in the middle is
That's George Membrino.
George Membrino.
And that's Jimmy DePrimo.
Jimmy DePrimo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And this makes me think of, you still keep connected to all over the country and over the world with many
George
people.
and I talk about every 10 days. He either calls me or I call him. And Danny O'Connor, we speak at least once or twice a month. And both of them have their doctorates. And here I am with just going to Nichols College. But we're still good friends,
Yes, of
you know.
course.
I like bright people, and they're bright.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends all over the country that I keep in touch with.
And you had mentioned that you have a phone deal where you can call.
I call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, any place in the country, and it's just one charge.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. And then I still have relatives, you know, on the West Coast and friends and down in Florida and the Midwest and everything. And I also have a military background family. I have a cousin in Kansas that was an instructor at the War College in Carlisle, and now is out, he does some work at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And yeah, then I brought a couple pictures of my wife.
That's what I wanted. I was going to show these next.
Yeah, doing bonsai. She's doing a bonsai with the bonsai master we studied with.
Your wife, Shirley.
He was from California. My wife was Shirley, and she was from Denver. And the gentleman started the first bonsai club in the United States by the name of John Naka, who was very active in bonsai, and he passed away, but that's who we studied with. He would come east and we would study with him. And then we'd go to California on business, and we'd go to his house, and there Shirley is with his very famous planting with him in his backyard. It's called Goshen, and it's at the National Arboretum in Washington now.
D.C.
Yeah.
And this is a picture of...
That's John and Shirley together, and we were good friends. And he was a great guy. And then we were being in the plant business. After I got out of the shoe business, we had the plant studio, and it was in downtown Fitchburg. And then we had changes of landlords, and we ended up at our house just doing bonsai. And we had a wholesale bonsai business, and used to lecture and teach at garden centers and at garden clubs. And because of the hip replacements, I can't plant in the ground anymore, but as far as involvement with bonsai, I'm at Tower Hill, and I visit Bonsai West in Littleton.
Now, Tower Hill, tell us about your...
Tower Hill is a botanic garden. It was owned by Worcester Horticultural Society, and they moved to this beautiful spot that was a cow farm in Boylston, Mass. Boylston, most people think of West Boylston on Route 12, but Boylston is a small, lovely little town on the east side of the reservoir, and they have 136 acres there with a magnificent building.
Yes.
And they have classes, and they have a gift shop, and they have a cafe, and they have lectures, and they have two very large greenhouses. The first one resembles one of the old European greenhouses with high ceilings, and then the newer one is a cooler greenhouse for lemon trees, orange trees, and camellias, and the other is for tropicals. And then they have different shows there, different societies. The Orchid Society has a show, and usually a sales area, and then the African violets are there, and the bonsai have a show in the fall, and they have the big Christmas area and selling area starting in late November after Thanksgiving. And then they give classes of all different kinds, including building stone walls.
Yeah.
And they have lecturers that come in that are noted throughout the world. And the place is fabulous, and the admission fee is $10 with a better discount for seniors. And it's just so delightful. They have woodland paths, and they have a down the hill, there's a pond garden with nature, a lot of natural animals. They have a very small staff, maybe 15 or 20. The executive director, John Trexel, has been there 25 years, and we're friends.
Yeah.
And they have about 250 volunteers.
And you volunteer there too?
And
still?
I volunteer there.
Yeah.
I used to help prune.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of things, and I volunteer in the library there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you still, even at your home now, these pictures.
Yeah, I can't plant in the ground because of the 2 hips and the knee, but I have a deck on the same level as the house, so I have 35 plants, vegetables, herbs, and flowers out on the deck.
Yeah, and that's what these 2 pictures are, these 2 snapshots. So you've kept your interest in.
Oh yeah, and I
gardening.
learned everything from my wife.
Yeah. And you learned everything from
My
sure,
wife,
yeah.
who I met when she was 16.
Yeah, and I'm going to show another picture that's related to flowers and the Leominster Hospital. I'm going to show, so Jack, I'm going to put these down, and I'm going to show this photograph, because you no longer volunteer at Leominster Hospital, but you volunteered 3,000 hours.
Yeah, 12 years.
12 years at
Yeah.
Leominster Hospital. And this is, I've got it upside down, but this is.
As you're driving up to the hospital from North Main Street, this was an entrance to the professional building, and I donated all these plants in a garden called Shirley's Garden in my wife's memory 10 years ago. And of course, it's grown a lot since then. And Steve DeJean is the landscaper, and he's at the hospital, and he does a great job, and he maintains the gardens and all the grounds. And for a number of years, I used to help him do that. I did a lot of jobs at Leominster Hospital. And so this garden is still there, and people get to enjoy it. And sometimes they'll come out and sit on the steps and when they have their lunch and everything. And
well, I've been by.
It's brought me a lot of joy, and the community a lot of joy.
Yes.
I also have a tree for her right across from St. Leo's at Carter Park. In her memory, and I give magazine to the library in her memory also. She was quite a lady. We were married 49 years.
Well, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, it is today.
So when I drive by there, I will know that
coming
it's
up the hill, you'll see the garden. And this is a driveway up above. So you can get off at the level of the professional building, the first office building. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
I've enjoyed doing these things. It gives me pleasure, but that I've been able to share my things and my expertise with other people in the community. And
I can tell.
This is how I was brought up, and I still continue to do it. I get up early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, and I keep active. I listen to the jazz station. I do my exercises, but age slows you down. And my father had one swear word: damn it to hell with it. And that kind of covers everything. And it doesn't offend people.
Age hasn't slowed you down, really. I mean, somewhat physically, you can't do as much as you did, but you still do a tremendous amount.
Most people I meet, even younger ones, say, I don't know how you do it. I can't keep up with you.
I
would have trouble. I laugh,
Larry, nearing the end of our interview, I want to ask you a few questions that I sometimes ask many of the interviewees. What changes have you observed in the ways that the citizens of Leominster make a living?
Well, Well, at one time in Leominster, there were big factories. There was Foster Grant. There were other plastic factories.
DuPont's.
We're in one now.
DuPont.
And this building is gorgeous, what they've done with the building. And Leominster still has a downtown. And through the mayor's office, they have these summer strolls and fall strolls, and they get a couple thousand people. I mean, this is unheard of. And we have these shopping centers surrounding us. When I grew up, there were no shopping centers. No stores were open on Sundays, you know, and stores were open one evening a week. Leominster was Thursday night. Fitchburg was Friday nights.
Now, why was that? Explain. I know, but I can explain that. It has something to do with payday, right? Did it have something?
Right. That's what governed it. And Fitchburg, of course, had the paper mills. But Leominster had the plastics industry, and it was really the center of the plastic industry. Most of it started right here in Leominster. And I remember people working and running the factories, and there was a nice downtown there. And I remember Monty's Restaurant during World War II. The line would be down onto the sidewalk waiting to get in the restaurant. A lot of servicemen
The front,
were in this area.
Monty's Garden, the front stairs, the steep front stairs with a beautiful neon sign, and there'd be a crowd.
Absolutely.
Waiting.
And the theater, there was the Metropolitan Theater was right near it, and on Mechanic Street was a Plymouth Theater, and where it's a church now, but it was the Leominster YMCA or Leominster Recreation Center, and that was originally the Rialto Theater.
Yes.
And the only complaint I have is that we still have a small post office, great post office, but small parking. And you go to all the towns, they have new post offices with parking.
That's true.
I don't know why we don't. But
parking is rough at the
But Leominster's a great town to live in. We have a wonderful school committee. I know some of the people, and a city council, and a lot of people that are active in participating in different events. Look at the library we have, unheard of in a city this size. And I'm very familiar, happy with most of the staff and Mrs. Shelton. And you go into City Hall and you see how it's been kept up under the guidance of Ralph Saccamarone and the different people. I'm familiar with a number of the people in the City Hall that work there for the city. And Leominster's a great city to live in. I'm so impressed. And coming here 55 years ago, I didn't even know how good it was. But it's fabulous.
It is. It is. And Fitchburg is a fine city too, but their location is different, and it's hard to get to.
Right, and downtown is a disaster.
And it's
they're trying to rejuvenate it. They have a nice young woman, and I know a number of the city councilors and stuff, but they weren't watching their books too well, and it's in financial trouble. The library's lost its accreditation, and which is very sad for the people. And you can't go downtown in Fitchburg at night. Leominster is bright and happy downtown,
but hopefully Fitchburg things will get
you know,
better. It is a fine city too.
And the college. Fellow from Leominster, Bob Antonucci, is the president of the college for 3 years, and he's done a fabulous job there. And the college is now Fitchburg State University, and there's a lot going, and they have senior classes there in the afternoon.
Yes, the Alpha, ALPH.
ALFA, Adult Learning in the Fitchburg area.
ALFA, Alpha, and you partake of those.
They started with about 10 offerings, and now they offer about 40 in 2 semesters, spring and fall.
Is there a charge?
And there's a $25 charge per class. But there's an additional great benefit. They give you a student card, and they run the cultural series, and tickets are half price. I mean, it's a bargain. And you can use the library too.
Which is a wonderful resource.
Right.
And you don't have to take tests or anything.
No tests or anything.
You can just go for your...
Some have some reading, but many times I've taken 2 or 3 cooking classes, and they have them at Fitchburg High School because they have a cooking room, as you see on TV, with mirrors over the stove.
So you can...
So you can watch them cook, and then they bring prepared food of what they cook, the ethnic foods, and afterwards you have a lunch there. There's an extra $10 or $15, but you have a lunch, and they're 5-week sessions. They're They're all in the afternoon. Retired Dr. Podiatrist Joe Adanti has done several on the Taste of Italy.
Yeah.
And Judge Elliot Zide, you'll meet in his office at the courthouse, and you'll go in and you'll hear the finishing up of a case, and he does he's fabulous. And then when the people from the Revia gave a course on Finland, my son's been going to Finland as a lawyer for 30 years, and so I took the history of Finland. And as Joe Adanti does, they talk about the people and their educations and their interests and their work, and you know, the religions and the politics, and those are fabulous. And I've taken other classes with qualified teachers from both outside of the college and college people, music classes, and it's just wonderful.
So Larry, the audience, the LATV audience, can see that you haven't, in some ways you've slowed down physically, you had to, but you haven't slowed down. You're, as you said, you're not retired when people ask you.
One of the problems that as you age, you know, your mind, you're of age, but your mind thinks you can do what you when you were 40, but your body
says no.
Does not.
No,
you know.
no.
But you know, that's how it is.
Just before we conclude this interview, you mentioned Robert Antonucci, who Bob, I call him Chalk.
Of course.
He was my. I taught with him at Lunenburg, and then he became my assistant principal at the middle school, and now he is the president of Fitchburg State University. Does he have a connection to Student Brothers?
Yeah, he worked in our Leominster store during high school and college.
Okay.
And so I've known him since he was a teenager, and he's a great, I think of him still as a young man. But
and his wife Jean, and Jeannie,
his wife is sweet, and he was, through marriage, he was related to Lou Amadeo, and Lou and I were friends too, and Lou has passed us, left us, but he was a great guy too. There are a lot of great people in Leominster, and many of them are still around, and I'm friendly with most of them.
So
at least we're acquainted.
Yes, and again, I've got to put in a plug for Fitchburg. Fitchburg, many great people, as you know, in both cities. So we're the Twin Cities. And we'll look forward to the future. Larry, I want to thank you very, very much.
I've enjoyed being here.
Well, it's.
I watch this TV show. It's great.
Well, thank you. It's. I have to compliment the LATV staff and the studios. I want to thank Jack Selly, Kyle Pimarini, Dennis Cormier, Tina Pimarini, Jane Pasco, and you, Larry, and as always, the LATV viewing audience. So thank you for being on Neighborhood Snapshot.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Now.